What if I told you that everything you believed about life in the desert is not true?
That water is a gift from the gods today.
Imagine
Drink
a world
slowly,
where the
my friend. We
temperature
still
in
have
the
hours.
shade reaches 50 degrees Celsius and the sun melts stones. In such conditions, without air conditioning, a modern person begins to lose consciousness after just 20 minutes of active movement. We are used to hiding from the heat behind glass and concrete, relying solely on electrical appliances and artificial cooling. However, thousands of years ago, an entire civilization not only survived in this hell, but also built the greatest monuments in human history. The ancient Egyptians worked 14 hours a day, building temples and pyramids under the scorching sun. They had no fans, no ice as we know it, and no synthetic fabrics. Their secrets lay in a deep understanding of the laws of physics, aerodynamics, and human biology. This knowledge was lost for centuries, and only now are we beginning to understand its ingenious simplicity. Watch the video to the end.
You know I need you. Just give me one more chance.
Are you ready to learn the truth about what really saved the skin of the Egyptians from burning alive? We are accustomed to thinking of cosmetics and oils as merely beauty products or ritual attributes of ancient priests. However, in ancient Egypt, applying oils to the body was a matter of life and death, not aesthetics. It was the body's first and most important line of defense against the harsh environment. The dry desert air instantly evaporated moisture from the skin's surface, leading to dehydration in a matter of hours. To prevent the loss of precious fluids, the Egyptians created a protective barrier on the body using vegetable fats. They used complex mixtures based on castor, sesame, or moringa oil, which acted as a thermos for the skin. This layer did not clog the pores completely, but it significantly slowed down the process of uncontrolled sweat evaporation. The oil also protected the epidermis from direct sunburn and cracking under the influence of hot wind and sand. Without this procedure, any worker on the pyramid construction site would have been out of commission by noon. Daily body anointing was as much a hygienic norm as a morning shower is for us. The state even issued oil to workers as part of their wages. The aromatic additives in these oils also played more than just a perfuming role, as is commonly thought. Myrrh, frankincense, and other resins had powerful antiseptic properties, preventing the growth of bacteria in the moist environment of the skin. In the heat, bacteria multiply at an incredible rate, and any cut or irritation. The mixtures were applied in a thick layer, creating an antibacterial film that lasted throughout the working day. This allowed people to maintain healthy skin even in conditions of complete unsanitary conditions and constant sweating. Interestingly, the composition of the oils varied depending on a person's social status, but the principle of action remained the same. Ordinary workers used coarse castor oil, which had a specific smell but did the job perfectly. Nobles preferred rare oils with the addition of expensive overseas incense brought from distant countries. But even the pharaoh did not go out in the sun without protecting his skin with a layer of sacred composition. It was a culture built on respect for the merciless sun. The Egyptians understood perfectly well that overheating of the body begins with overheating of the skin. By cooling the skin or preventing it from heating up, they reduce the overall load on the heart and blood vessels. The oil film reflected part of the solar spectrum, acting like modern sunscreen with a high protection factor. This allowed them to stay in direct sunlight for hours without suffering from heat stroke. We often underestimate their knowledge of physiology, considering them primitive people of antiquity. It would be very interesting to hear your opinion on such methods of protection. What do you think about using oils instead of clothing to protect against the heat? Could you walk around like that? Write about it in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new discoveries about ancient civilizations. Guess how long it took to create the perfect air conditioner out of mud? Ancient Egyptian architecture was not just a set of walls and roofs, but a complex engineering system of thermoregulation. The Egyptians built their houses from a material that was literally at their feet, Nile silt. They mixed raw mud with straw and sand to form bricks, which were then dried in the sun. This seemingly primitive material had unique thermophysical properties that modern concrete does not have. The walls of residential buildings were made incredibly thick, sometimes reaching a meter in width, even in ordinary dwellings. This thickness created an effect known in physics as thermal inertia or thermal mass. During the day, the scorching sun heated the outside of the wall, but the heat did not have time to reach the inner surface. The unfired brick acted like a sponge, absorbing and retaining thermal energy within its structure. Inside the house, it remained cool, comparable to the temperature in a deep cellar. When night fell and the temperature in the desert dropped sharply, the process reversed. The walls heated during the day began to release the accumulated heat back, but not inside, but outside and inside, warming the air. This allowed the room to maintain a comfortable temperature around the clock, smoothing out the wild fluctuations of the desert climate. The house literally breathed, regulating its microclimate without a single mechanism or energy source. It was a passive climate control system based on the laws of thermodynamics. The windows in Egyptian houses were small and located near the ceiling, which was also no accident. This arrangement allowed hot air, which rises to escape outside without lingering in the living area. The small size of the windows minimized the amount of direct sunlight entering the room, maintaining semi-darkness. The light that did enter was diffused and did not heat the surfaces of the furniture and floor. In this semi-darkness, the eyes rested from the glare of the desert sun, and the body relaxed. The color of the walls also played a huge role in combating overheating in buildings. The Egyptians often whitewashed the exterior walls with lime. The white color reflected a significant portion of the solar radiation, preventing the walls from heating up too quickly. It was a simple but effective way to reduce the heat load on the building by a few more degrees. The whole city looked like a cluster of snow-white cubes sparkling in the sun. But thick walls were only passive protection, and the Egyptians also invented an active ventilation system. In the next chapter, you will learn how they made the wind work for them, even when there was no breeze outside. What if I showed you a time machine that would take you back to the era of the first engineering masterpieces? The Egyptians didn't just hide from the heat, they learned to control air currents by creating forced ventilation.
We have mastered the art of forced ventilation, using clever architectural designs to control the airflow and regulate the temperature in our homes.
They invented an architectural element that would later be called malkaf in Arabic, or wind catcher. It was a special shaft or tower on the roof of a house with a sloping cut at the top. This device completely changed the air circulation inside the building, turning it into a ventilated tube. The opening of the malkaf was always directed strictly north, where the coolest and most constant winds blew. Even a slight breeze, which was impossible to feel at ground level, was captured by this device at height. The walls of the shaft captured the flow and directed it vertically downwards into the living quarters. Pressurized air entered the house, displacing stale and hot air through windows and doors. This created a constant circulation that cooled the rooms even on the hottest days. Containers of water or porous, damp cold plates were often placed inside the shaft. Passing through this damp area, the hot wind cooled and became saturated with moisture, becoming heavier. The cooled air rushed downwards, creating the effect of a pleasant cold shower. It was a real air conditioning system that worked without electricity or freon. The temperature difference between the street and the house could reach 10 degrees or more. The malkafa's design was thought out to the smallest detail, including protection from dust storms and sand. Sometimes special fabrics were used, which had to be periodically changed or cleaned of sand. This allowed people to breathe clean air, even when a sandstorm was raging outside. Clean air was essential for lung health in the dusty desert. These wind catchers were found not only in the palaces of the pharaohs, but also in the homes of wealthy townspeople. Their size and shape could vary. Malkafas were often decorated with ornamental elements, turning them into part of the architectural ensemble. They rose above the flat roofs of cities like periscopes looking north. It was a recognizable silhouette of any Egyptian settlement. Large public buildings and temples used entire systems of several wind catchers. Engineers calculated their location so that there were no dead zones with stagnant air. The ancient builders' knowledge of aerodynamics was remarkably advanced. Do you think it would be worth implementing such technologies in modern private homes in hot regions? Like this post if you like the idea of natural air conditioning. Guess what happened next to fashion in ancient Egypt under the influence of the climate? It would seem logical to wear as little clothing as possible in the heat so that the body could breathe. However, the Egyptians, especially the nobility, wore clothes that covered a significant part of the body. The secret lay in the material. They used the highest quality linen, which they called woven air. This material had the unique ability to wick moisture away from the body and dry quickly. Flax for clothing was grown and processed using special techniques to achieve incredible thread fineness. The fabric was translucent, light, and did not fit tightly to the body. When a person sweated, the linen instantly absorbed the moisture and evaporated it, cooling the skin. The loose cut of the clothing created a fur-like effect, inflating the air with every movement. People literally wore a personal fan on themselves. The color of the clothing was exclusively white, which had a strict physical basis. The color white reflects the sun's rays as much as possible, preventing the fabric from heating up in the sun. Dark clothing in the desert would turn into a hot compress, killing its owner. Whiteness also symbolized ritual purity, which was important to religious Egyptians. Maintaining whiteness required frequent washing, which also contributed to hygiene. Another surprising element of their style was the wigs they wore over their shaved heads. It would seem crazy to wear a wool or hair wig in the heat, but in fact, shaving the head was a way to get rid of lice and improve heat transfer. The wig acted as a protective helmet, creating shade for the head and neck. Air circulated between the scalp and the base of the wig, preventing the brain from overheating. Wigs were made from human hair, wool, or plant fibers soaked in beeswax. The wax helped them keep their shape and protected the hair from drying out and breaking in the sun. Noble Egyptians had collections of wigs for different occasions, from light everyday ones to heavy ceremonial ones. During work or rest at home, wigs were removed, allowing the wearer to enjoy the coolness of a shaved head. It was a very practical transformer system. But clothing and walls are not everything, because water and food also needed to be cooled somehow. In the next chapter, you will learn how ancient refrigerators worked without electricity. The Egyptians could not imagine their lives without cool water, which was their main salvation in the heat. But how to cool water when the air temperature is higher than body temperature and there is no ice in sight? They used the ingenious physical principle of evaporative cooling to create special porous vessels. These jugs were made from a special mixture of clay, which remained slightly permeable to moisture after firing. Microscopic drops of water seeped through the walls of the vessel. This sweat on the surface of the jug instantly evaporated under the influence of dry hot air and wind. The evaporation process requires energy, and this energy was taken from the jug itself and the water inside it. As a result, the water in the vessel cooled down, becoming significantly colder than the surrounding air. The hotter and drier the wind outside, the more intense the evaporation and the colder the water became. Paradoxically, the heat itself worked to cool the water. Such vessels, known today as zir, were placed in the most ventilated areas of the house or in the shade of trees. They were often placed on special wooden stands in a draft from a window or in a windbreak. The constant flow of air accelerated evaporation, turning the clay pot into a powerful cooler. The water in them could cool down to 15-20 degrees, which seemed like an icy drink compared to the 40-degree heat. In addition, the Egyptians used this principle not only for drinking, but also for cooling rooms. Large porous vessels with water were placed around the rooms to humidify and cool the air. The water evaporated, saturating the dry air with moisture, which made breathing easier and lowered the temperature. It was the prototype of modern humidifiers and air washers. This method was also used to store perishable foods such as cheese, meat, or fruit. The products were placed in a smaller pot, which was placed inside a large pot of water. The space between the pots was filled with wet sand and covered with a damp cloth. The evaporation of water from the sand and cloth cooled the inner pot, creating a thermos effect. This refrigerator kept food fresh for several days. In this way, the Egyptians mastered thermodynamics long before scientists discovered its laws. They turned water and clay into a high-tech survival device. Without this technology, civilization in the desert simply could not have existed. Are you ready for the shocking truth about how the Egyptians used their homes at night? When the sun went down, the desert stones, heated by the day, continued to give off heat for a long time, and it became stuffy inside the houses. The walls began to release the accumulated heat into the rooms, making them uncomfortable to be in. Therefore, when the sun went down, Egyptian families moved their lives to the roof. The flat roofs of houses were not just an architectural feature, but a fully fledged living area, a second living room and bedroom under the open sky. The Egyptians brought light furniture, mats, and bedding up to the roofs. Here, under the starry sky, the air cooled much faster than down on the ground or inside the house. The light night breeze blowing at altitude brought welcome relief and coolness. Families dined, socialized, and played board games, enjoying the freshness. It was a time of social life when the heat receded and the city came alive.
When we play up here.
Lightweight canopies made of fabric or climbing plants were often built on the roof for sleeping. They protected sleepers from the morning sun and possible dew, but did not interfere with air circulation. Such gazebos created comfort and privacy, turning the roof into a comfortable penthouse. Some wealthy homes had real gardens and pots on their roofs, which added coolness. An interesting item in their bedroom was the headrest, which replaced the pillow. It was a curved stand made of wood, stone, or ivory on a leg. A soft down pillow would heat up the head in the heat and make the neck sweat, which was unbearable. The hard headrest supported the head, allowing air to circulate around the neck and back of the head. Sleeping on the roof required early awakening, as the first rays of the sun instantly heated the space. The Egyptians rose at dawn to get the hardest work done before the midday heat set in. Their circadian rhythms were strictly tied to the movement of the sun and the temperature regime. Life came to a standstill at noon and resumed in the evening. The roof was also used for storage, drying food and household chores. Dates and fish were dried here, and laundry was washed, using the sun's energy to its advantage. It was the cleanest and most ventilated place in the house, away from the dust and smells of the street. The space was used as efficiently as possible. The diet of the ancient Egyptians was not just a means of satisfying hunger, but a strategic system for maintaining water and salt balance. In conditions where a person loses liters of sweat a day, ordinary water could not replenish the body's losses. Along with sweat, vital minerals and salts were lost, which could lead to cramps and death. Therefore, the basis of their drinking regime was beer, but not at all like the beer we are used to seeing today. Egyptian beer was a thick, nutritious drink with a very low alcohol content. It was more like a liquid porridge or kvass, rich in carbohydrates, vitamins, and amino acids. During fermentation, the water was purified of pathogenic bacteria, making it safe to drink. This drink did not intoxicate, but rather nourished and restored strength, acting like a modern isotonic drink. Everyone drank it. Men, women, and even pyramid builders received several liters of it a day. The second pillar of the diet was bread, which was baked from spelt or barley. It was coarse, often mixed with sand due to the nature of the milling process, but very filling. Bread was eaten with large amounts of onions and garlic, which were considered medicinal plants. These vegetables strengthen the immune system and help the body fight infections in hot climates. In addition, they stimulated the appetite. Salted foods such as dried fish and cheese played a special role. Salt retained water in the body, preventing dehydration during intense sweating. Workers received regular portions of salted fish, which was necessary to maintain their working capacity. Without sufficient salt, a person in the desert becomes weak and can die of heat exhaustion. Instinctively, they found the ideal balance of micronutrients. Fruits and vegetables were the main source of living water and vitamins. Dates, figs, grapes, melons, and cucumbers were consumed in huge quantities. Cucumbers and melons, consisting mainly of water, cooled the body from the inside. Dates were a high-calorie fuel that did not spoil in the heat and was convenient to take with you. They were natural energy sources and moisturizers. There were no long-pile carpets or warm skins in the interiors of Egyptian homes. Instead, they used coverings that promoted cooling through evaporation. Floors were often covered with mats woven from reeds, papyrus, or palm leaves. In the morning, or at the height of the heat, servants or homeowners would sprinkle these mats generously with water. The water was absorbed into the porous structure of the plant fibers, but did not create puddles or mud. Then the process of slow evaporation of moisture from the huge surface area of the mat began. As it evaporated, the water cooled the air directly in the living area at human height. This method was called wet floor and was extremely effective in dry climates. The air temperature in the room could drop by several degrees in a short time. In addition, humidity increased, which made breathing easier and prevented the mucous membranes from drying out. This created a microclimate reminiscent of the freshness after rain. The floors under the mats were often made of compacted clay or stone. These materials retained the coolness of the earth well and did not heat up easily. The contact of the wet mat with the cold floor enhanced the cooling effect. Sometimes special gutters were made in the floors to drain excess water when washing. Reed mats also served as excellent insulation from the hot sand or earth in courtyards. They were laid in the shade of trees, creating cool islands for rest and socializing. The lightness and mobility of the mats allowed for quick changes in the configuration of the comfort zone. They could be taken out onto the roof, spread out in the garden, or stored in the pantry. The Egyptians were masters of landscape design, but their gardens were not created solely for beauty. Every garden, every pond, and every tree was part of a complex system for cooling the territory. At the center of rich estates and palaces, there was always a courtyard with a pool or pond. The water in the pool acted as a heat accumulator, slowly heating up during the day. Evaporation from the surface of the pond humidified and cooled the air in the courtyard. The wind passing over the water picked up this coolness and carried it into the windows of the surrounding rooms. Ponds were often surrounded by dense vegetation, creating a trap for cool air. In such oases, the temperature was significantly lower than outside the walls of the house. The choice of trees was also deliberate. Preference was given to species with broad, dense crowns that provided thick shade. Sycamore and date palms were planted so that they shaded the walls of the house and the roof from direct sunlight. The shade from the trees not only protected against heat, but also created an area of low pressure. This stimulated air movement. The Egyptians also actively used pergolas and awnings covered with grapevines. The grapes created a dense green ceiling that was impervious to the sun, but allowed air to pass through. Under such awnings, places for rest, dining, and work meetings were arranged. The evaporation of moisture from the leaves of plants, transpiration, further cooled the air under the canopy. Gardens were laid out, taking into account the windrows, so that they would serve as a barrier to the hot winds from the desert. A strip of trees filtered dust and sand, protecting residential buildings from sandstorms. The green belt around the house acted as both a living shield and an air filter. The coolest places in ancient Egypt were not in palaces, but underground and inside massive stone temples. The Egyptians knew very well that at a depth of several meters, the temperature of the earth remains constant and cool all year round. Therefore, they actively used underground spaces to store food, wine, and relax. Cellars and basements were an essential part of the economic complex of any wealthy home. The temperature in these underground storage facilities remained at 20-25 degrees, which was ideal for preserving grain and oils. Here it was possible to take refuge from the most intense heat when the air on the surface was scorching. Special ventilation shafts often led to the cellars, providing a supply of fresh air. These were the prototypes of modern bunkers with life support systems. A special category of structures were temples, built from huge stone blocks and often carved into the rocks. Stone has enormous heat capacity and heats up very slowly. Inside the Karnak or Luxor temples, in their hypostyle halls with forests of columns, it is always dim and cool. Massive stone roofs reliably insulated the interior from the sun. We have seen that the survival of ancient Egypt in extreme heat was not a miracle, but the result of a systematic scientific approach. They did not try to defeat nature with brute force, as we do with our air conditioners. Instead, they studied the laws of wind, water, evaporation, and the heat capacity of materials, making them work for them. Their homes were cooling machines, their clothes were high-tech membranes, and their diet was the perfect chemical fuel. Every aspect of their lives, from applying oil to their skin in the morning to sleeping on the roof at night, was part of a unified adaptation strategy. They created a civilization that thrived where others would have perished. Their technologies were environmentally friendly, timeless, and accessible to everyone, regardless of status. Today, as the world faces global warming, the experience of ancient desert engineers is more relevant than ever. Which of the ancient methods of combating heat do you find most ingenious and applicable today? Would you like to have a wind catcher at home or sleep on the roof under the stars? Share your opinion in the comments, suggest topics for future journeys into history, and be sure to subscribe to the channel.